Okay, Revelation 14 verse 9. And the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, if any man worship the beast and his image, and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation. And he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment ascendeth up for ever and ever, and they have no rest, day or night, who worship the beast and his image, and whosoever receiveth the mark of his name. Sounds ominous, doesn't it?
Yeah. And come to think of it, how many messages out there in the Christian world is surrounded on the ominous side of this.
And they're dealing with it. Everybody has an opinion on the mark of the beast. But everybody has forgotten what the beast was.
That's the problem.
Or is.
So therefore they've lost whose mark it is.
And the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, if any man worship the beast and his image. Point number one, it's an issue of worship. How do you worship? And receive his mark in his forehead. But if it is in your forehead, then what does that mean?
Cognitive.
You're thinking about it, right? So it affects your mindset.
Decision making.
So this has to do with a mindset. It has to do with worship or in your hand. That's how your hand operates. So the mark of the beast has to do with worship, it has to do with the mindset, and it has to do with your activity as a consequence of the mindset.
Yes.
Right?
So that your decision making affects how you worship.
Correct. And the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God. Now wine, as we saw in the last one, is doctrine. And if you accept false doctrines, then there are consequences. And the consequence is the wrath of God. Now, the wrath of God is not a vindictive God that is pouring out his wrath.
No.
It is a consequence of a choice that you have made that disqualifies you for heaven. Now, why does it disqualify you from heaven? Because God is a tyrant?
No.
Because you'll bring disharmony into heaven.
Exactly. And in any case, you won't be happy there, because the rules that you don't like here, you won't like there, because it's the same rules that we read in the Bible.
Correct. And then he will be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. Now the fire and brimstone that God talks about, he gives us an example. Like Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed until they were burnt to ashes, so it will be, and they will not rise again. Therefore the smoke of their torment ascendeth for ever and ever. In other words, it is a finality.
Yes, the consequences.
Yes, it's not the smoke that is forever and ever. The consequences of the burning and the smoke will be forever and ever.
Correct. As you just mentioned, Sodom and Gomorrah, they're not burning still.
Correct.
But the consequences of that is still...
Yes. And the Bible is quite clear. They will be as though they never were. And also there will be ashes under your feet. There will be no resurrection from this destruction. And then there's this interesting portion here. And they have no rest, day or night, who worship the beast and his image, and whosoever receiveth the mark of his name. Now, we need to know who the beast is. We need to know what the mark is. And what has his name got to do with it? Well, his name always stands for character.
Yeah.
And because he is also Babylon, it stands for rebellion against God's word. So it has to do with worship. It has to do with your cognitive understanding, your thinking about these issues of salvation. And it has to do with your actions. If you do not accept God's way, then unfortunately you disqualify yourself and there will be a destruction. and you will not enter into the rest. And the beast doesn't have rest.
No.
Neither does the image of the beast have rest. In other words, they've lost something that leads to rest.
Yes.
Is that right?
So we have to find out what.
What have they lost that leads to rest? And what do you need to rest from?
Mm-hmm.
That's a very important question. So let's go a little bit deeper and see if we can unravel all of this. Now, the third angel's message we read in the Great Controversy is the most fearful threatening ever addressed to mortal, and it's contained in this message, this third angel's message. The most fearful threatening ever addressed to mortal. That must be a terrible sin which calls down the wrath of God unmingled with mercy. Men are not to be left in darkness concerning this important matter. The warning against this sin is to be given to the world before the visitation of God's judgments, that all may know why they are to be inflicted and have opportunity to escape them. Prophecy declares that the first angel would make his announcement to every nation, kindred, tongue, and people. The warning of the third angel, which forms a part of the same threefold message, is to be no less widespread. So it's a universal message. Mm-hmm. It is represented in the prophecy as proclaimed with a loud voice by an angel flying in the midst of heaven, and it will command the attention of the world. So it's a very serious issue.
You see, the thing is, once again, you cannot have a lame message. You cannot only give the two angels' messages.
No,
because
you
it's
must
not
give
two.
the third as well. Now, we know from Scripture that the second beast of Revelation chapter 13 is the one that enforces the mark of the beast, right? Now, the second beast is an image of the first beast. In other words, it looks like him in character and acts like him. So the first beast, we need to know who that is. We've defined it many times. We'll put in a slide to redefine it for the sake of completeness. But let's just read what this second beast does, this second political religious power.
Yeah.
It must be secular religious, because the first beast, Catholicism, as a system, not as the people within it. The first beast is a religio-political system.
Yeah.
And the image will act like the first one did. In other words, be prescriptive in terms of its doctrines.
Correct. And it will be Christian.
And it has to do with worship. Revelation 13:16, and he, this is now the second beast, causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their forehead, and that no man might buy or sell, save he that had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name. So here's a picture, Martin, of the Vatican and the Capitol. And we can see that architecturally they are an image of each other.
Yeah.
So the one system is the same as the other system. Interesting, both are actually temples.
Yeah.
Because they have altars in them. So the second beast, which is Protestantism, because we saw that Protestantism had become part of Babylon. It had fallen in the second angel's message. This is the one that will enact legislation that is to give honor to the first beast. So let's go to the first beast historically, and we read about it. This is John Wesley's explanatory notes, and he writes on Revelation 13, "And I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy." As we've said before, this is a conglomerate beast of all the beasts of Daniel chapter 7. a wild beast coming up. He comes up twice, first from the sea, then from the abyss. He comes from the sea before the 7 vials. The great whore comes up after them. O reader, this is a subject wherein we also are deeply concerned, and which must be treated not as a point of curiosity, but as a solemn warning from God. Now, when he talks about the great whore that comes up, he's referring to Revelation chapter 17, because she rides the beast, and on her forehead was written mystery, Babylon, the mother of harlots, right? The danger is near. Be armed, both against force and fraud, even with the whole armor of God, out of the sea. That is Europe, in other words, the nations of Europe. This beast is the Romish papacy, as it came to a point 600 years since, stands now, and will for some time longer. To this and no other power on earth agrees the whole text, and every part of it in every point, as we may see with the utmost evidence from the propositions following. And then it gives a Bible expose, and it is basically a study showing that no other power fits all the criteria. So this is what the Reformers believe. The first beast is Catholicism, and it is its mark that is going to be enforced by Protestantism under the direction of the political, religious union, church and state, of Protestant America. Now, let's just look and see whether there's a possibility of this actually happening, right? Let's go further. Some Democrats have signaled that the influence religion has on Johnson's politics is troubling. This Representative Jamie Raskin said in a post on X that Johnson's speakership is what theocracy looks like.
So now it's interesting, because theocracy has laws.
Correct. Jesus said, render unto Caesar what is due unto Caesar, and unto God what is due unto God. Don't mingle the two. And he never did. Don't we have to have the faith of Jesus?
Correct. No church and state.
No. Johnson has indicated that he does not believe in the separation of church and state, spelled out in the First Amendment's Establishment Clause. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof. Now, we've consistently said that that will be overthrown.
Yes.
Or it will be placed in another light.
Yes, it will be not come in and get rid of it. It will be
redefined. That's it, Martin. All right, so let's just go a little bit further and see how he addresses this issue.
Certainly there's a move to keep religion out of politics and to rigidly enforce the so-called separation of church and state. The founders of this country would have certainly supported our efforts here today. Indeed, this common misunderstanding about the separation concept is an important one. It's one that's useful for us to address, and I think today's a good day to do it. In fact, it's one of my favorite subjects. It's a topic that I've debated and written and taught university courses on for about 25 years, about a quarter century. For 2 of those decades, I was in the courts defending religious freedom cases, and I learned during that time that I really believe that this is among the most misunderstood subjects in our entire culture. See, most people today who insist upon a rigid separation of church and state are unaware that that phrase derives not from the Constitution itself, of course, but from a personal letter that Thomas Jefferson wrote to the Danbury Baptist Association in 1802. But the key and the essential foundation of a system of government like ours must be a common commitment among the citizenry to the principles of religion and morality. Without these virtues, indispensably supported by religion and morality, every nation will ultimately fail. This is a great time to observe our faith. We should never back down.
So Martin, he says that it is indispensable, if you want to have a moral society, that the church and state should be together on those issues, right?
That's it.
Is it then possible to enact laws that might seem biblical, but in actual fact contradict biblical values?
That will be definitely possible. If we take, for instance, and we've mentioned it before, when Nebuchadnezzar came to realize that Daniel's God was the true God, then he enacted laws. It seemed right, but it was not, because church and state are never supposed to give laws.
Correct. Here's another statement, Letters and Manuscripts, Volume 7. The so-called Christian world is to be the theater of great and decisive actions. Men in authority will enact laws controlling the conscience after the example of the papacy. Babylon will make all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. Every nation will be involved. This is a moral issue. Is there a conflict of religions at the moment?
Yes.
It's raging, isn't it?
Wars about it.
Is there a conflict of moral issues or pertaining to moral issues raging within Christianity?
Yes.
Are people getting fed up with the status quo?
Yes, especially the conservative side. They just can't take it anymore.
All right, so if the pendulum swings that way and they decide to enact moral legislation, some of which might actually be very good, is it possible that in the mix something will be thrown in that negates God's plan of salvation?
It's easy to happen.
Okay. Jeremiah 18 verse 15 says, because my people have forgotten me, they have burnt incense to vanity, and they have caused them to stumble in their ways from the ancient paths, to walk in paths in a way not cast up. Martin, this is a very serious issue. The people have forgotten.
Yeah.
You know, if you have forgotten, it means at some stage you knew.
You knew, and it means you might have to remember.
All right. So they forgot the ancient paths, and they're walking in a path of their own devising. Protestantism, were they shown the way?
Yes.
Were they very clear, the Protestants, on what the issues were? And is it possible that Protestantism, for the sake of fraternity, throws those ancient paths aside?
Definitely. We've shown it also in the Babylon is fallen, is fallen.